fine. Okay. Hey, Claire, it's so good to talk with you. And I was interested in chatting about this, the importance of in the unique self-emergence process, there's and those people who may not realize there's these five selves that we talk about along the journey to unique self. And one of them is true self. And I'm wondering if we can talk about the value and the importance of not skipping over that
Hmm.
self.
Yeah, that's a great inquiry. And actually, I would say that the unique emergence really focuses, even though in the teachings of the unique self we have the five selves, right? The focus on unique self emergence is really the three selves: separate self, true self, and unique self. And true self is really the gate, the portal to unique self. And often in developmental coaching, in coaching in general, we talk a lot about unique qualities, unique voice, unique this, unique that. And when true self is skipped, really we're just talking about improving separate self or creating a higher or a better version of our separate self. So really the true self is what makes is really the what distinguishes unique self coaching from other types of coaching. And that module, that whole module in the unique self process, where we first introduce the coachee to true self, or more than introduce, we actually point to true self, because I've never seen yet someone who has not had a taste of true self, even though they didn't know. And so that's one of the most exciting things that I discovered when I and Barbara began to play with the process, is to realize that when we explore what true self is and talk about true self and invoke it and start cultivating it, or encouraging someone to cultivate their access to true self, source, their being dimension, no person yet that I've met does not is totally separate from true self. So it's just a matter that this particular aspect of the coaching is really a matter of helping the person reconnect, just rehabilitate that capacity to be in true self, and then cultivate it. And from that ground, then we can begin to cultivate and work with the uniqueness of each person.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's
I hope
interesting because you mentioned not, you haven't encountered anyone who hasn't had an experience of their true self. And it's interesting because sometimes when I initially introduce it to someone, to people, some people are like, oh no, I haven't experienced that. But then I'm like, well, wait a minute. Think about any experience that you've had where you felt yourself as part of something larger, like that you're not this small skin encapsulated ego, and that you felt the boundaries of yourself actually somehow dissolve or expand in a way that's
yeah,
non-ordinary. It
yeah,
could have been, you fell in love. Could have been you had a newborn child. It could have been, on the sports
exactly,
field and you're in a flow state, right?
exactly.
Could have been on a psychedelic. It could have been in a meditative experience. It could have been in nature. Like there's so many doorways, right, to experiencing this. And it's interesting also because people, when they, after that experience, because in a lot of organizations and in culture in general, it's almost like it's not allowed to talk about that stuff, or it's
Yeah,
so people don't know how to hold it. And so
right on.
they deny the experience, or they
Mhm.
just let it go as, oh, that was then, this is now, or no big
Exactly.
deal, or they somehow make it smaller than it actually was,
Yeah,
which is
that's
too
exactly
bad,
it.
right?
And so what we're doing as unique self coaches in this particular aspect of the process is that we're rehabilitating this experience. We're helping the person integrate that experience and allow it. As you said, often it's being dismissed. You don't know how to talk about it. If it's been, if it was a big thing, a big experience, it's even harder to talk about it. Then it's even easier to push it away when the effects and the aftertaste has faded. So first, allowing the person to reconnect with that taste, and then to cultivate it, because cultivation is everything, and cultivation through practice, finding a practice that works for the person. There are so many practices. Different people cultivate true self differently. So it's important to have a large array of practices. And yes, as you said, there are as many tastes of true self as there are unique selves. So helping the person to recognize, when they are most easily in connection with with that source. Yeah.
I remember when I got a job at a sales related company 5 or 6 years ago, and I did not want the job at all. And when I got into the company as the sales coordinator, I was devastated, and I felt myself so contracted, like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? I'm kind of a dead end, and I just can't wait to find another job that actually gives me back on my path, right? But at some point, and what I was doing at the time, I kept practicing, kept doing my meditation and experiencing the possibilities beyond that small vision of my life. And I started looking around for signs that actually I was perfectly where I needed to be. So in a sense, there's a state experience of true self, of like experiencing myself as this, dissolving my boundaries. But there's also a story that weaves together my experience in a way that enables me to see that I'm woven into the fabric of reality. I'm inseparable, and I'm interconnected. I'm actually held by a larger force that's sort of carrying me and walking with me. And actually every detour is a destination, as Mark Gaffney often says, right? And so, long story short, the more I looked for that as a reality, the more it became a reality too, the more my perception clarified, to where by the end of those 5 years, there's a lot of details in the story, but I was given the position that I thought I could never get at that company, right? I thought I was a dead end, but then in reality, it was precisely the position that I had been looking for in terms of being able to give my gifts and be able to facilitate leadership development in that case and organizational transformation. And so it was just it's somehow miraculous the way it works, because I couldn't have done it myself as a separate self, as a small skin encapsulated ego. I couldn't have, if I were just to skip to unique self without, from a separate self perspective, it would have been, oh, it's my talent, my talent contest. Like, how much can I prove myself at the company and fight my way up the ladder to get seen and recognized?
You could only do it because you were grounding in true self. And finding your way back into true self when you lost it, because it's a process, right? We lose it, we reconnect with it, but it's by this remembrance. I call it remembering. This returning. This drawing from source, that you were able to remember each time who you are. And from that, you were becoming who you are. That's a process. We can't skip true self. And actually, true self is, as you said, we're always in true self. And we don't always know, we don't remember, but we can remind each other, and we can remind ourselves at every moment, even now, right now.
Yeah.
Just like, stop, look into your eyes, and here we are. It's that dimension of being, the eternity in every second, is always already here. And from there is freedom. And there is this direct access to the evolutionary impulse that wants to be and move through you and do what's yours to do. And that information, that impulse, that unique flavor that David accesses, that Claire accesses, is unique to each one of us. And so that's really what we're doing with the unique self-emergence process. We learn to rehabilitate our place in that great web of being, our unique place, and to find our belonging and to find our unique offering through that connection.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you're describing this and pointing it out, I see myself just opening up my perception. And it seems like that's what happens when you access true self. Like every day we condition ourselves to a particular pattern of seeing the world and perception. What they often call the default mode network in the brain, like the way that we conditionally limit our perception to be able to function, right? And that's kind of the way the ego survives, and good for the ego. It's doing as best as it can. And every time we're able to open up and experience the ground of being, it actually enables us to reconfigure those nodes in the brain, and also just the perception that we're experiencing. And you know, Mark Goffney often uses the term, it's the possibility of possibility, which seems so apt, because when you're in that state, it's like anything's possible when you get back to that. And then, you know, you come back to your kind of individuated, unique self from there, and realize, okay, and in the field of possibilities, this is my unique next step.
Exactly.
Like, this is what's needed now, which is also what we learn in the unique self-emergence process, right? Is how to respond to the call of reality. What is needed right now?
And in order to do that, the process is to clarify, right? To clarify. And so, without going into details, this first practice that we have in the unique self process is this first practice of coming to the moment and to really tap into what's ours to do, can only be really embodied once we know who we're not, once we have clarified all the shadows that are at us, and the voices, the limiting beliefs, the armor of the body. So all these things that are keeping us in this small, narrow vision of the mind, and that are just keeping us really imprisoned in our separate self. All these shadows need to be made object. They need to be identified, which is what we do in the first module of the process, in the separate self module. And that allows us to tap into the truth of the moment, into the invitation of the moment, by tapping, once we are able to be here, to be present. Because as long as we are grasped by the voices, the beliefs, the armor of the body, we're not really here.
Yeah. Right. And then so we can actually glimpse into our true nature at that point. And let me ask you a question: is have you found with your clients that, let's say they have had access to that experience, that they have a support system or other people with whom they can kind of continue to foster it, or is it something that doesn't seem to be available to most people in your experience? Do you know what I'm asking? To be able to support that realization of true self.
Well, it really depends on people's environments. Some people have the desire to create communities or the opportunity to create communities and circles of friends and family that supports them in their development and in their cultivation of true self. Sometimes it's a very lonely process. It really depends on people's environments, work environments, family environments, and what they are able to provide for themselves. But what I know is that when someone is actively engaged in that type of self-work, they are seeking for supportive environments and circles of friends that can help them remain in the practice, remain in the field. It's not always possible. So it's really joy.
Well, because in the one of the client sites that I've worked with, I introduced mindfulness meditation practice, and probably about 8 or 10 of the 20 or so of the program actually participated. They showed up, they participated, and they all liked it, and it was like, wow, thank you, that was so beautiful, and yet the tyranny of the urgent and the tactical, like, oh, I don't have time. I don't have time to slow down and take 15 minutes to breathe and feel my breath and be present to myself, which is so strange in the grand scheme of things. How many people take 15 minutes to do the most, waste time here and there all the time? It's strange.
No,
But for whatever reason, the musings of the ego and also like going back to this idea of culture and the collective, like doesn't support that in this particular. And I would say most corporate America, at least in the West, in America, it seems to be the case is that there's not really a supportive way to experience that. And so I'm wondering, just maybe we can talk briefly of the unique self-emergence process. It can be done individually, right? But it also is often done as a group or in a process with other people. Do you want to share a little bit about how the
well, this
group
is
process actually promotes and supports people along their journey?
totally, yes, it's actually the best way to experience the unique self process because the collective is just so powerful. And there is an emulation, there is a field that is created when a group of people work together go together through the process. There's actually a subtle field which supports, which supports the practice. And the practice seems it's easier. It's really magical and not really magic because it's known now that a group is a powerful alive thing, and it's always more than the sum of its parts. We know that. And so there is this dynamic that happens when a group comes together and shares about their practices together. Each of our practice enforces and gives strength to other practitioners. And sometimes I've experienced it myself, that progress, I'm just, just like a simple example would be that at a particular moment in the process, you might not be involved so much in the practice, but you're actually realizing that it's having effect on you. It's just because the field is there and it's practicing. And so, yeah, there's an aliveness and a vibrancy in the field that supports the whole group. And that's why I love working with groups, because of that element. There's just more exponential potential for growth. It's just more interesting. Not to say that the process is not interesting individually. It's a powerful process, but there is a psychoactive component in the group that's very interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, and it reinforces what you said earlier, that the nature of true self is that we are woven into the fabric of reality. We are inextricably
Yeah.
interconnected. And so, of course, everything that one person does will affect the other, right? And
Mm.
especially if there's a field of unique
A
intimacy
coherent
around
field.
that,
There's a
a
coherence.
coherent field. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that even is something that happens on the one-to-one scale that I've experienced in the coaching relationship. It's not just me and the other person. It's me, the other person, and this field around us that is
Always a
moving
field.
through us, right?
It's
This sort of
always a,
transpersonal, right?
yeah.
And so, of
It's
course, it's
a
going to
whole,
exponentially increase with there's more people.
yeah. I mean, that whole intimacy of that it's the intimacy um, equation that is in action within the field, you know. So yeah, a collective is powerful, and there's always, as you say, even in a one-on-one relationship, coaching relationship, there is a collective, there is a relationship, an interpersonal dimension. Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned this, the intimacy equation, so we can briefly share what that is, right? So intimacy equals shared identity. We have a common source
And the,
times in the context of otherness. So we're actually also different and distinct
yeah.
times mutuality of
Oh,
recognition. We recognize each other. We recognize that actually I can see you. Mutuality of pathos. We feel each other. There's
we
empathy
know our
there.
stories, and that's a big
Yeah, there's
part of the group, is that we share a lot and we know our story. There is a mutuality of pathos, and then
hmm
mutuality of ethos times mutuality of ethos. So there are first principles and first values that we share, that we agree on. There is um, for example, the the knowledge that we are one in true self, right? So there is common ground that we
hmm
agree to operate in. Yeah.
Yeah. And a common purpose,
And a common
mutuality of
purpose.
purpose. Yeah.
It creates a beautiful formula. It's a beautiful formula for that creates a beautiful container to really tap into the full potential of one's unique offering, one's unique becoming in the world.
What more could there be to ask for, right? Is to actually be to show up as your unique expression of the field and giving to the field and receiving the field and experiencing more love along the way, more intimacy.
Yeah.
So thanks, Claire. It's been a pleasure chatting with you about this, and may we all experience more intimacy and um, our own uniqueness.
Amen. Thank you, David.
Amen. All right.